I did not bring the man from the shelter to the reading of my grandmother's will to make a scene. I brought him because he helped me on the highway when no one else would. But when we entered the boardroom, my sister Celeste did not look at his frayed coat. She looked into his eyes and froze. That was when I realized my sister was not afraid of losing the money. She was terrified of being remembered. The drive back to Briar Glen was a lesson in regression. I was 33 years old. I had a job in Philadelphia, a lease I paid on time, and a life that was quiet, manageable, and entirely my own. Yet, as the highway markers counted down the miles to the Massachusetts border, I felt the familiar, suffocating weight of being a butler settling over my shoulders. It was a physical sensation, like wearing a coat that was too expensive and 2 sizes too small. My grandmother, Margot Butler, was dead. That was the headline. The subtext was that I was returning to the scene of a crime I had never fully understood, only escaped. I had not spoken to my sister, Celeste. In nearly 3 years, we traded Christmas cards that were polite to the point of hostility, signed with the stiff formality of business partners rather than siblings. But Margot had been the anchor, the iron weight that held the family ship in the harbor, and now that she was gone, the current was dragging us all back together. It was late October, and the sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that refused to break. My sedan, a reliable vehicle that had never given me trouble in the city, began to shudder as I took the exit toward the older part of town. Briar Glen was not a city that welcomed you. It tolerated you. The roads were narrow, lined with trees that had stripped their leaves weeks ago, leaving skeletal branches clawing at the power lines. I checked the dashboard clock. I was running late. The pre-meeting gathering at Ketterly and Rhodes LLP was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. It was 10 minutes to 4, and the engine gave a sickening lurch. The check engine light flickered on, a mocking orange eye, and then the power steering died. I managed to wrestle the wheel over, guiding the coasting vehicle toward the cracked pavement of a convenience store that looked like it had surrendered to the elements a decade ago. The car groaned and died completely about 20 feet from a safe parking spot, its rear end jutting dangerously into the feeder lane. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, my knuckles white. I could not be the mess. I could not be the sister who arrived late, flustered, and broken down. That was the role Celeste had assigned to me since we were children. Ariana the chaotic, Ariana the dreamer, Ariana who could not handle the realities of the Butler legacy. I got out, the wind biting through my blazer. I tried to push against the driver's side door frame, steering with one hand, but the incline was slight and against me. Need a hand? The voice was rough, like gravel crunching under tires. I looked up to see a man standing near the edge of the store's overhang. He was wrapped in a coat that had once been navy blue, but was now a spectrum of grays and grime. His beard was thick, hiding the lower half of his face, and his hair was matted under a knit cap by every visual metric of Briar Glen society. He was invisible, a piece of scenery to be ignored. "I am okay," I said, breathless from the exertion. "Just need to get it to the curb. You will strip the gears if you leave it in park," he said. He did not move toward me, respecting the invisible boundary of fear that usually exists between a woman alone and a strange man. "Put it in neutral. I will push from the back. You steer." His tone surprised me. It was not the soliciting tone of a panhandler, nor was it aggressive. It was calm, clinical, and efficient. I hesitated, then nodded. I climbed back in, shifted the gear, and felt the sudden, heavy lurch of the car moving. He was stronger than he looked. In 30 seconds, the car was safely tucked into a spot away from the traffic. I got out to thank him. He was wiping his hands on a rag he had pulled from his pocket. Up close, I saw the lines around his eyes. They were deep, etched by exposure. But the eyes themselves were startlingly clear, a sharp, intelligent hazel that seemed to be cataloging everything about me, from my scuffed heels to the tension in my jaw. "Thank you," I said, reaching for my purse. That was incredibly kind of you. Please, let me give you something for your time. I pulled out a $20 bill. In Briar Glen, $20 was a guilt tax. You paid it to make the discomfort go away. He looked at the money, then at my face. He did not reach for it. I do not want your money, he said. It is not charity. I insisted, feeling foolish. You helped me. I know, he said, and I do not want the money. He turned to walk away, his gait uneven, favoring his left leg. The rejection stung more than it should have. It threw me off balance. I checked my phone. 4 o'clock exactly. The law office was only 2 miles down the road, but I had no car. Wait, I called out. He stopped but did not turn around immediately. My name is Ariana, I said. I am running late for a meeting at a law firm down the road. My car is dead. I am going to call a cab. But, are you heading that way? He turned then. Where? Ketterly and Rhodes, on Main Street. He looked at the ground, then back at me. I am trying to get to the day center on 4th. It is past Main. If you can wait for the cab with me, I can drop you off. I said, it is the least I can do. He studied me for a long moment. I felt like I was being interviewed for a job I did not know I had applied for. Okay, he said softly. I would appreciate the ride. The cab arrived 10 minutes later. The driver, a local who looked at me with bored indifference and at the man with open hostility, said nothing as we climbed in. I am Gabe, the man said as we merged into traffic. Ariana, I repeated. The ride was short, but the silence in the back seat was heavy. Gabe did not stare out the window like a tourist. He watched the buildings pass with a kind of weary recognition. When we passed the old library, his eyes narrowed slightly. When we passed the bank, he looked away entirely. We pulled up to the curb in front of Ketterly and Rhodes. It was a brick fortress of a building, with polished brass plaques and manicured hedges that looked like they were trimmed with nail scissors. I paid the driver and realized I had a problem. The cab was leaving. I had to go in. Gabe needed to get to the day center, which was another mile walk in the freezing wind. The driver had refused to take a second fare without a new dispatch call. You can come in, I said, making a snap decision, just to call another cab. I will pay for it. You should not have to walk in this cold. Gabe looked at the building, and for a second, I thought he was going to refuse. He looked at the brass plaque that read, Established 1952. He took a breath that shuddered in his chest. Are you sure? He asked. This does not look like a place for people like me. It is a law office, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. It is a place for anyone who needs it. Come on. We walked in. The lobby was warm, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. The receptionist, a woman I vaguely recognized from high school, looked up and her smile faltered. She looked at my suit, then at Gabe's coat, and her expression settled into a polite confusion. I am here for the Butler meeting. I said, I am Ariana Butler. Of course, she said, her eyes darting to Gabe. And he is with me, I said firmly. He helped me when my car broke down. He is just waiting for a taxi. She nodded slowly. They are waiting for you in the conference room. Ms. Rhodes is ready. I turned to Gabe. Sit here. I will tell them I have arrived, and then I will order the car for you. He nodded, taking a seat in the corner, far away from the magazines and the crystal water pitcher. He sat with his hands folded in his lap, his posture erect. He did not slouch. He did not fidget. He waited. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and pushed open the double doors to the conference room. The room was exactly as I remembered it from my grandfather's probate hearings years ago. The walls were lined with books that were never read, and the center of the room was dominated by a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on. At the head of the table sat Marin Rhodes. She was a woman of 60 whose steel-gray hair was pulled back so tight it pulled her eyes into a permanent state of skepticism. She was writing on a yellow legal pad, and there, to her right, sat Celeste. My sister looked immaculate. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my car, tailored to perfection. Her blonde hair was a sleek curtain around her face. She was leaning forward, saying something to Marin with a smile that suggested they were co-conspirators in a grand, successful plot. "Ariana," Celeste said, stopping mid-sentence. Her voice was cool water. "You are late." "I know," I said, stepping into the room. "I had car trouble." "Typical," Celeste said, though the smile didn't leave her face. It was a reflex for her, digging the knife in while looking pleasant. "We were just discussing the preliminary valuation of the estate. I need a moment," I said. "I have a guest in the lobby who needs a cab called." "A guest?" Marin looked up, her glasses catching the light. Celeste let out a short, sharp laugh. "Did you bring a date to the reading of grandmother's will?" "That is bold, even for you." "He is not a date," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "He helped me push my car off the road. I am just making sure he gets where he's going." I turned back to the door, waving for Gabe to come to the threshold so I could ask the receptionist for the phone. Gabe stood up and walked toward the open double doors. He stopped just at the entrance, illuminated by the harsh overhead track lighting. "I am sorry to interrupt," Gabe said, his voice low and cultured. Celeste looked up. The silence that followed was not the silence of a pause. It was the silence of a vacuum. It was the sound of all the air being sucked out of the room violently. Celeste froze. I have seen my sister surprised. I have seen her angry. I have seen her grieving. I had never seen her look like this. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes, usually so guarded and calculating, went wide, the pupils blowing out until her eyes were black holes. She gripped the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles straining against the skin. She looked at Gabe not as a stranger, not as a homeless man, but as a ghost, a phantom that had walked out of a nightmare and into a law office. Gabe did not move. He looked at Celeste, and his expression did not change. He held her gaze with a sadness that felt ancient. "Celeste?" I said. The sound of my voice seemed to snap a chord in her. She blinked, and the mask slammed back down. It was terrifying to watch, the way she recomposed her features, forcing the blood back into her cheeks, tightening her jaw, narrowing her eyes, but her hands were still shaking. She hid them quickly in her lap. "My God," Celeste said. Her voice was an octave higher than usual, brittle as dry leaves. "You really do bring home every stray you find. Do you not, Ariana?" The insult was sharp, meant to cut me, to distract everyone from the moment of panic that had just occurred. But I had seen it. I had felt the terror rolling off her in waves. "He is not a stray," I said, watching her carefully. "He is a person." Celeste looked away from him, refusing to let her eyes make contact again. "Marin, can we please proceed? This is a private family matter. We cannot have spectators. I will wait outside," Gabe said. He turned and walked back to the lobby, his footsteps quiet on the plush carpet. I sat down across from Celeste. She picked up a pen and began to tap it rhythmically against her notebook. Tap, tap, tap. It was a nervous tick she hadn't had since we were teenagers. Marin cleared her throat, sensing the tension but misreading the source. She adjusted her glasses and looked at us both. Margot Butler was a woman of specific intent. Marin began. "Her will is not a simple distribution of assets. It is a structured process. Today is the first phase." I tried to focus on Marin's words, but my eyes kept drifting to Celeste. She was staring at the legal pad, but she wasn't writing. She was drawing harsh, jagged lines, over and over again, digging the pen into the paper. "The estate," Marin continued, "is valued at roughly $12 million, the majority of which is held in Briar Glen Family Holdings. However, the distribution of these funds is conditional." "Conditional on what?" Celeste asked, her voice sharp. "On the Butler Outreach Trust," Marin said. Celeste's hand stopped moving. "Your grandmother left specific instructions," Marin said. Opening a thick folder, "The inheritance will be released in 2 stages. First, a small stipend for immediate expenses. Second, the full distribution of the trust and the personal estate, but only after a full verification of the Butler Outreach Trust's records for the last 5 years. Verification? Celeste said. I handled those records. They are impeccable. Marin paused. She looked at Celeste with a professional pity. The will states that an independent audit must be conducted, and that both you and Ariana must be present for the review of the findings. Furthermore, there is a sealed letter. Marin produced a heavy cream envelope from her briefcase. It was stamped with red wax, the old-fashioned kind Margot loved. This letter, Marin said, will only be opened and read to you if and when the verification steps are completed to the satisfaction of the estate's executor, that is me, and if we do not, I asked, then the assets are liquidated and donated to the Red Cross. Marin said simply, the entire estate. The room was silent again. That is ridiculous, Celeste hissed. I have run that foundation for 6 years. Grandmother knew everything I did. Marin did not blink. Then you have nothing to worry about. Celeste, the verification should be a formality. We will reconvene in 3 days to begin the review. You will need to provide access to all physical and digital files. Celeste stood up. She gathered her things with jerky, frantic movements. I need to go. I have a dinner. She did not look at me. She did not look at Marin. She walked out of the conference room with her head down, moving fast. I followed her out to the lobby. She walked past Gabe without turning her head, pushing through the front doors into the cold afternoon. I watched through the glass as she fumbled with her keys, dropping them once before getting into her pristine white SUV and speeding out of the parking lot. She had not just been annoyed, she had been fleeing. I turned to Gabe. He was still sitting in the corner. The receptionist was gone for the day. I am sorry about that, I said. He looked up. His face was tired. Your sister seems intense. That is one word for it. I said, come on, I will get you that ride. The sun had gone down by the time I checked into the Briar Glen Inn. It was a modest place, not where Celeste would stay, but I preferred the anonymity. I had dropped Gabe off 2 blocks from the day center because the traffic was snarled. I had tried to give him $40 for a meal, but he had refused again. I ordered room service, a club sandwich I didn't want, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the television without seeing it. My mind kept replaying the moment in the boardroom. Celeste was a woman of control. She curated her life like a museum exhibit. She did not have panic attacks. She did not freeze. And she certainly did not look at homeless men with the kind of visceral, shaking fear I had witnessed. Why? Whatever Gabe was, a drifter, a beggar, a good Samaritan, he was nothing to Celeste. He shouldn't have been, unless he was. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something crucial. I grabbed my coat. I needed air. I drove the rental car I had picked up after the meeting, a nondescript gray compact, and found myself driving aimlessly through the town. Briar Glen was beautiful in the dark, all gas lamps and colonial architecture, hiding its secrets behind velvet curtains. I turned down 4th Street. Passing the day center, it was closed, the lights off. I drove another block and saw a figure sitting on a bench near the park entrance. It was Gabe. He was sitting with his knees pulled up to his chest, arms wrapped around his shins. The temperature had dropped to freezing. He wasn't moving. I pulled over and rolled down the window. Gabe? He looked up, squinting against my headlights. Get in, I said. He shook his head. I am fine. You are freezing. I said, get in the car. I am not asking. He hesitated, then slowly unfolded himself and climbed into the passenger seat. A blast of cold air came with him. He was shivering violently. I am taking you to a motel, I said. No, he said, his teeth chattering. No motel. I do not do that. Why? I just do not. I drove for a minute in silence. Okay, then I'm buying you a hot meal, and you are going to eat it in the warm car, and you are not going to argue with me. He didn't argue. I found a diner that was still open on the highway. I went in and bought 2 coffees, a container of chili, and a side of cornbread. I brought them back to the car. We sat in the parking lot, the engine idling to keep the heater running. Gabe ate slowly, with a deliberate, disciplined restraint. He didn't shovel the food in like someone who was starving, even though I suspected he was. He ate like someone who remembered table manners. "Thank you," he said after he finished the chili. "You are welcome." He held the coffee cup with both hands, letting the steam warm his face. "Why did you help me today?" I asked. "On the road?" He shrugged. "You were stuck. Most people would have kept driving. Most people are in a hurry," he said. "I have nowhere to be." I looked at his profile. The street lamp outside cast a shadow across his face. "My sister," I said carefully. "She looked like she knew you." Gabe stiffened. I saw his jaw tighten. He took a sip of coffee. "People see what they expect to see," he said. "She saw a bum in a nice office. It startled her." "No," I said. "That is not what happened. She is a snob. Gabe, if she saw a bum, she would have wrinkled her nose and asked the receptionist to spray air freshener. She wouldn't have looked like she was going to faint." He turned to me. His eyes were guarded, a wall of hazel steel. "I do not know your sister." "Ariana. I have been in this town for 3 months. I sleep in the park or the shelter. I mind my business." He was lying. It was a smooth lie, a practiced one, but it was a lie. I could hear the hesitation in the rhythm of it. I did not press him. I knew better than to corner a frightened animal. And despite his calm, that is what he was. I dropped him off near the park entrance where he said he had a spot that was out of the wind. I tried to give him the blanket from my trunk, but he refused that too. "I do not take what I cannot carry," he said. I watched him walk away into the shadows, a solitary figure disappearing into the dark of Briar Glen. I drove back to the inn, my mind racing. Celeste Butler did not fear poverty. She did not fear judgment. She feared exposure. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about the way Celeste's hand had shaken when she picked up her purse. I thought about the specific way her eyes had dilated, the fight-or-flight response. It wasn't snobbery, it was recognition. Celeste knew him, and more importantly, she knew that he knew her. Margot's will, the Butler Outreach Trust, the missing records, the verification steps, and a man living on the streets who spoke like a professor and terrified my sister. The pieces were there, scattered on the floor. I did not know how they fit together yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just here to bury my grandmother. I was here to dig something up, and Celeste was going to do everything in her power to stop me. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a tightened vice behind my eyes. The sunlight streaming through the sheer curtains of the Briar Glen Inn was too bright, too cheerful for the heavy, gray dread sitting in my stomach. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. There were no missed calls, no texts. I sat up and dialed Celeste. I knew her schedule. At 8 in the morning, she would be drinking hot water with lemon and reviewing her social calendar in her sunroom. She was a creature of rigid habit. She picked up on the third ring. "Ariana," she said. Her voice was clipped, breathless. "I am rushing out the door. I cannot talk." "You are not rushing," I said, swinging my legs out of bed. "You are drinking lemon water and avoiding me." "We need to talk about yesterday." "There is nothing to talk about," she snapped. "You embarrassed me. You brought a homeless man to a legal proceeding. It was a stunt. Ariana, it was a desperate cry for attention because you cannot stand that grandmother left me in charge. I did not care about who was in charge." "Celeste," I said, keeping my voice level, "I cared about the look on your face. You were terrified. You looked at him like you knew him." "Don't be absurd," she said. I was shocked. The man smelled like mildew and gasoline. It was revolting. It was not disgust. I said, "It was fear." "Who is he?" "He is a beggar. Ariana, he is a random drifter you picked up on the highway because you have a savior complex. You are trying to turn this into a drama because you are bored with your own life. Stop trying to sabotage the inheritance." The line went dead. I looked at the phone, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Sabotage. That was Celeste's favorite word. Anything that disrupted her carefully curated reality was sabotage, but her deflection was too aggressive, too fast. She was trying to bury the moment under a pile of accusations. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a thick wool sweater, and drove toward the day center. The Briar Glen Day Center was located in the basement of a deconsecrated church on the edge of town. It was a place the locals pretended did not exist, even as they dropped off bags of old clothes at the back door. I parked across the street and walked over. I found a woman named Sarah organizing a donation bin near the entrance. She was older, with kindly eyes and hands roughened by work. I asked her if she had seen a man named Gabe. "Gabe?" she asked, pausing in her folding. "The quiet one? With the limp?" "That is him," I said. "He was here early," she said. "Helped us unload the delivery truck. He's round back. I think he does not like to be inside when it gets crowded." "Is he trouble?" I asked carefully. Sarah laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Gabe? No, he is the opposite. He stops the fights. He never takes more than a single plate of food. Even when we offer seconds, he is strict about it. Says others need it more. He is an odd one, though. Speaks like he swallowed a dictionary." I walked around the side of the brick building. I found Gabe sitting on a low concrete wall, staring at the tree line. He was wearing the same coat, but he looked cleaner, his face scrubbed. "Gabe," I said. He did not jump. He turned his head slowly. "Ariana," he said, "you are persistent. I brought you coffee," I said, holding out a paper cup and a bagel. He looked at the offering, then at me. "Thank you." He took it. We sat in silence for a moment. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. I spoke to my sister this morning. I said, "She claims she does not know you." He took a sip of the coffee. "Then she does not know me. She said you were a random drifter." I said, "But she looked at you like you were a ghost, and you looked at her like you were disappointed." Gabe lowered the cup, his eyes fixed on the distant trees. "Disappointment implies expectation." He said, "I have no expectations of people like Celeste Butler." "People like her?" I asked. "Wealthy? People who think the truth is something you can edit," he said. He turned to me then, and his gaze was piercing. "You should be careful. Ariana, the Butler Outreach Trust is not just a charity, it is a machine." I froze. I had not mentioned the name of the foundation to him. I had only said inheritance meeting or grandmother's will. "How do you know the name of the trust?" I asked. Gabe's face closed down instantly. It was like watching a door slam and lock. He realized his slip. He stood up, crumbling the half-eaten bagel in his hand. "I read it in the paper," he said quickly. "The obituary. It mentioned the trust." "The obituary only said she was a philanthropist," I said, standing up to face him. "It did not name the specific entity." "How do you know about the Butler Outreach Trust?" "I have to go," he said. "I promised Sarah I would sweep the loading dock." He turned and walked away, his limp more pronounced as he hurried. He did not look back. I drove to the law offices of Ketterly and Rhodes with a knot of anxiety tightening in my throat. Gabe was lying, Celeste was lying, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. When I arrived, Celeste was already in the conference room. She did not look up when I entered. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with aggressive speed. Marin Rhodes entered a moment later, followed by a woman I did not recognize. The stranger was mousy, in her late 40s, wearing a gray suit that washed out her pale complexion. She carried a stack of binders and looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Good morning," Marin said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "This is Lenora Pike. She is the board secretary for the Butler Outreach Trust. She is here to assist with the record verification." Celeste finally looked up. "Hello, Lenora?" Lenora nodded, her eyes darting away from Celeste immediately. "Hello, Ms. Butler, Ariana? Please," I said, taking my seat. Marin opened a file. "As we discussed yesterday, Margot's will stipulates that the bulk of the estate is held in a separate entity known as Briar Glen Family Holdings. This entity contains the investment accounts, the properties, and the liquid cash, totaling approximately $12 million. $12 million, Celeste whispered. It was a reverence, not a calculation. However, Marin continued, raising a finger, the assets and family holdings cannot be distributed to the beneficiaries, that is you two, until the Butler Outreach Trust passes a full compliance review for the last 5 years. This is absurd, Celeste snapped. I have been the acting director for 6 years. Grandmother trusted me implicitly. The will is the will, Marin said calmly, and we have hit a snag. What snag? I asked. Marin looked at Lenora. Lenora swallowed hard, her throat clicking audibly in the quiet room. Ms. Pike? Marin prompted. Lenora opened the top binder. Her hands were trembling. We are missing the quarterly filing reports for 2020 and 2021, and the ledger for the Community Grant Fund has several gaps. Gaps? Celeste said, her voice turning icy. What are you talking about? Lenora? The files are in storage. I told you that last week. We checked the storage unit. Marin said, the boxes are there. The files are not? Celeste waved a hand dismissively. Then they were misfiled, or lost in the move when we renovated the office. It is a clerical error. Marin, do not make it sound like a conspiracy. It is not just the missing files. Marin said. She slid a piece of paper across the mahogany table. I looked at it. It was a printout of a bank statement. There are transfers, Marin said. Irregular ones. Money moving from the trust's primary account into a vendor account for something called Northwell Civic Strategies. And then, the money disappears. No invoices, no service records. Celeste picked up the paper. She stared at it for a long time. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, calculating, spinning. I recall Northwell, Celeste said slowly. They were consultants. We hired them for brand awareness. Grandmother approved it. Do you have the contract? Marin asked. I'm sure I can find it, Celeste said. It is in the archives. We need it, Marin said. And we need those missing quarterly reports, until every dollar is accounted for. The $12 million sits in Briar Glen Family Holdings. Untouchable. And if the records are not produced within 30 days, the default clause triggers. Which is? I asked. Liquidation of the estate to the Red Cross. Marin said. I leaned forward. I can help. Celeste's head snapped toward me. Excuse me? I work in logistics. I said, I handle supply chain documentation for a living. I know how to track paper trails. If the records are just misfiled, I can help Lenora organize the archives and find them. Absolutely not. Celeste said, Why? I asked. We both want the inheritance, don't we? If there is a 30-day clock, we need all hands on deck. You do not know the system, Celeste said, her voice rising. You do not know the donors. You do not know how grandmother worked. You abandoned this family. Ariana, you left for Philadelphia and never looked back. You do not get to swoop in now and play the hero. I did not abandon the family, I said quietly. I escaped it. You left me to deal with her, Celeste shouted. The veneer finally cracked. You left me to deal with her decline, her demands, the foundation, everything. You just sent Christmas cards while I was here drowning in her expectations. You do not touch those files. Ariana. I will handle it. She stood up, breathing hard. I will find the documents. Lenora, come with me. Lenora Pike looked at Celeste, then at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She looked terrified. She didn't move. Lenora! Celeste barked. Lenora jumped up, clutching her binders to her chest. Yes, Ms. Butler. Celeste stormed out. Lenora scurried after her, but at the door, she paused. She looked back at me for a split second. It was a look of pure desperation. Then she was gone. Marin Rhodes sighed and took off her glasses. Your sister is under a great deal of stress, Marin said diplomatically. That is not stress. Marin, I said, that is panic. I left the office feeling like I was walking through a minefield. Celeste's reaction to the offer of help was telling. If the files were just lost, she would welcome the assistance. She didn't want me looking because she knew what I would find. I sat in my car in the parking lot and sent Celeste a text. Coffee. The roasted bean. 1 hour. We need to stop fighting and fix this. Please. I waited. 3 minutes later, a reply popped up. Fine. I drove to the coffee shop. It was a trendy place that had opened since I left. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs. I ordered a black coffee and took a table in the back. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. I checked my phone. Nothing. 45 minutes passed. I knew she wasn't coming. It was a power play. She wanted me to sit there, waiting for her, feeling small. My phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. Stop digging if you want peace. Go back to Philadelphia. I will send you your check when the estate settles. I stared at the screen. Stop digging. It was an admission. You don't tell someone to stop digging unless there is something buried. I left the coffee shop, but I didn't go back to the inn. I drove to the address I had seen on the top of Lenora Pike's binder. The trust's office was in a small professional park near the river. I pulled into the lot. It was 5 p.m. Most of the lights were off, but there was a light on in the back corner suite. I parked and walked to the glass door. It was locked. I knocked. Lenora Pike looked up from her desk. She jumped when she saw me. She shook her head, waving me away. I knocked again. Harder. I put my hand on the glass. I mouthed, "Please." She hesitated. She looked toward the inner office door, presumably Celeste's, which was dark. Then she slowly got up and unlocked the door. "You should not be here," she whispered, opening it just a crack. "Celeste will be furious." "Celeste is not here," I said, "and Celeste is not the one who is going to go to jail if there is fraud in the trust. Lenora, you are the secretary. You signed the documents." Lenora's face crumbled. She opened the door wider and let me in. "I did not steal anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I believe you." I said, "But something is wrong. Lenora, the missing files, the Northwell payments. What is going on?" Lenora sank into a chair in the waiting area. She looked small and defeated. "There was a complaint," she said softly. 3 years ago, an internal whistleblower." "Who?" I asked. "I do not know his name." She said, "He was a compliance officer for one of the major donor networks. He started asking questions about the Northwell payments. He said the money was looping back." "Looping back to where?" "To the family," she whispered. My stomach dropped. "To grandmother?" Lenora shook her head. "I do not know. The complaint was filed, and then it just went away. Celeste came in one day and said it was a misunderstanding. She said the compliance officer was unstable, that he had been fired. She made me delete the email thread." "And you did it?" "I have a mortgage. Ariana. My husband has medical bills. I need this job. Celeste said if I asked questions, I was disloyal to Margot. And nobody says no to Margot Butler, even when she is dead." I thought, "So the records are not missing." I said, "They were destroyed?" "Hid." Lenora said, "Celeste took the 2020 and 2021 boxes to her house. She said she needed to audit them herself. That was 2 weeks ago, right after Margot died." "Thank you, Lenora." I said, "You have done the right thing telling me. Please do not tell her I spoke to you." Lenora begged, grabbing my arm. "She will fire me." "I won't. I promised." I walked back to my car. The wind was picking up, whipping dead leaves across the pavement. A compliance officer, an internal complaint, a man who was fired and called unstable. I knew exactly who he was. I drove back to the park. It was dark now. I found Gabe in the same spot, under the overhang of the bandshell, out of the wind. He was reading a paperback book by the light of a street lamp. I walked up to him. I did not offer food this time. I did not offer pleasantries. "Hello?" "Gabriel," I said. He marked his page and closed the book. He looked up at me, and the mask was gone. There was no feigned confusion, no deflection, just a weary acceptance. "You figured it out," he said. "Lenora Pike told me there was a compliance officer who asked too many questions 3 years ago." I said, "She said he was fired. She said Celeste called him unstable. That is the standard playbook. He said, discredit the witness. It is very effective. Your name is Gabriel Hale. I said, I looked you up in the car. You were a forensic accountant. You worked for the Ashford Donor Group. I was a forensic accountant. He corrected. Now I am a man who sleeps in a park. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why let me drive you around? Let me buy you coffee. And pretend you were a stranger? Because I am a stranger. Ariana, he said, the man who investigated your family is gone. He died of shame and bankruptcy about 2 years ago. I am just the leftovers. Celeste recognized you. I said, yes, he said. She was the one who got me fired. She went to my firm's partners. She threatened to pull the Butler influence from the entire donor network if I wasn't removed. She said I was harassing her. She said I was obsessed. And were you? I was right, he said softly. I was right about the money, and that is unforgivable in a town like this. He stood up. He was tall, and despite the rags, he held himself with a dignity that made my heart ache. Go home. Ariana, he said, take your inheritance if you can get it. Go back to Philadelphia. Forget the missing records. Forget Northwell. Why? I asked. Because inheritances turn people into strangers. He said, you think you know your sister. You think you know your grandmother. But put $12 million and a reputation on the table, and you will see faces you do not recognize. I saw your sister's true face 3 years ago. It destroyed my life. Do not let it destroy yours. He started to walk away. I am not leaving, I called after him. He stopped. I am not going back to Philadelphia, I said, and I am not going to let her win. She thinks she can scare me off. She thinks she can bully Lenora and destroy you and hide the truth. I walked closer to him. I am going to find those records. Gabriel, I am going to find out where the money went, and I am going to clear your name. He turned back. His expression was pained. Why? He asked. Why would you do that to your own family? Because, I said, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. If I take that money without knowing the truth, I am just another one of them, and I would rather be broke than be Celeste. Gabriel looked at me for a long time. The wind ruffled his beard. Finally, he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. If you go down this road, he said, there is no coming back, I know. I said, then you need to know where to look. He said, I waited, but not tonight. He said, tonight. You need to sleep. And you need to decide if you are really ready to tear your family apart, because once you pull that thread, the whole tapestry unravels. I am ready. I said, we will see. He said. He walked into the darkness, leaving me standing alone in the cold, but I wasn't shivering. I felt a fire burning in my chest. Celeste wanted a fight. She wanted to play games with text messages and lawyers. She thought she was the only one who knew how to play. But she was wrong. She had spent her life protecting a lie. I had spent mine looking for a way out. I got back in my car. I didn't go to the inn. I drove past the old Victorian house on the hill, Margot's house. It was dark, looming against the sky like a mausoleum. I pulled out my phone and texted Celeste back. I am not digging for peace. I am digging for the truth. Keep the check. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and put the car in gear. The war had officially begun. The house on Sycamore Drive sat behind a wrought iron gate that had not been fully closed in years, a testament to my grandmother's belief that she was untouchable. Margot Butler did not fear intruders. She assumed they would know better than to cross her property line. I parked my rental car at the curb. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, the sky the color of a wet slate roof. Marin Rhodes had granted me permission for a supervised visit to retrieve personal mementos, photographs, clothing, small items of sentimental value. Nothing of financial consequence was to leave the premises. Waiting for me on the porch was a junior associate from Ketterly and Rhodes, a young man named David who looked like he had been ironed into his suit. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. Ms. Butler, David said, nodding as I walked up the path. I have the inventory list here. We have to log everything you touch. I understand. I said, I just want my photo albums. And maybe her scarf. He unlocked the heavy oak door, and the smell hit me instantly. It was a mixture of lavender, lemon oil, and the underlying, sweet decay of old paper. It was the smell of my childhood, preserved in amber. The house was silent in a way that felt heavy. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the heavy drapes. I walked into the living room, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. Everything was exactly as she had left it. The crystal bowl on the coffee table still held peppermint candies. The throw blanket was folded over the arm of her chair. I moved to the study. This was where Margot had held court. The desk was a massive slab of cherry wood, currently cleared of all papers by the lawyers, but the bookshelves were still packed. I ran my hand along the spines of the books, encyclopedias, biographies of great men, tax codes. On the bottom shelf, tucked behind a row of leather-bound histories, I saw the corner of a metal box. I pulled it out. It was a gray, lockable document box, the kind you buy at an office supply store. On the top, written in black marker on a piece of masking tape, were the initials B, G. What is this? I asked. David stepped forward, his pen poised. That is part of the estate inventory, he said. It is locked. We do not have the key yet. I ran my thumb over the tape. B, G, Briar Glen? Or something else? The front door opened. I froze. We were supposed to be alone. Hello? A voice called out. It was bright, airy, and completely artificial. Celeste walked into the study a moment later. She was wearing a camel hair coat and carrying 2 coffees in a carrier. She stopped when she saw me holding the box. Ariana, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. And David, isn't it? I thought you two might need a warm-up. It is freezing in here. Ms. Butler, David stammered, clearly charmed and terrified. You are not supposed to be here during a supervised retrieval. Oh, pish, Celeste said, waving a hand. I am the executor's primary contact. I just brought coffee. I am not taking the silver. She walked over to the desk and set the coffees down. Then she turned to me. Her eyes dropped to the metal box in my hands. What did you find? She asked. Her voice was casual, but I saw the muscles in her neck tighten. Just looking through the books, I said, found this. I took a step toward the light to examine the lock. Celeste moved. It was a subtle movement, a shift of weight, but it was aggressive. She put herself between me and the door. That is just old tax receipts, she said. Grandmother kept everything. It is junk. Then why is it locked? I asked. Because she was paranoid. Celeste said, put it down. Ariana, you are getting dust on your coat. I didn't put it down. I watched her hands. She was gripping her own coat lapels, her fingers twisting the fabric. A fine tremor was running through her left hand. I am just curious. I said, B, G. What does it stand for? Briar Glen. Obviously. Celeste snapped. Look, David, she is handling estate assets. You should log it and put it back. We do not want any accusations of tampering. David looked nervous. Ms. Butler is right. If it is locked, it stays. I looked at Celeste. She was staring at the box with a hunger that looked like starvation. She wanted it. She wanted it so badly she was vibrating with it. Fine, I said. I placed the box back on the shelf, pushing it deep behind the books. But I'm noting its location. David, I said, item number 42, gray metal box, location, study, bottom shelf. Make sure it is there when the probate inventory is done. I will, David said, writing it down. Celeste let out a breath that sounded like a hiss. Good. Now, can we hurry this up? I have a lunch appointment. I grabbed a photo album from the side table, pictures of us as children, before the money ruined us, and walked out. Celeste stayed behind for a moment, talking to David, her voice low and persuasive. I waited by my car. When David came out, he looked flushed. Celeste followed, looking triumphant. She didn't look at me as she got into her SUV, but I saw her check the rearview mirror. She was watching me to make sure I left. She was afraid of a metal box. 2 hours later, I walked into the Briar Glen Public Library. It was a sanctuary of silence, smelling of floor wax and old glue. I found Gabriel in the reference section, sitting at a long wooden table with a stack of files. He looked better. He had shaved his beard down to a manageable scruff, and his clothes, while still worn, were clean. He looked less like a specter and more like a graduate student who had run out of funding. "You are late," he said without looking up. I ran into my sister, I said, sitting across from him. She tried to hijack my visit to the house. He looked up then, his hazel eyes sharp. "Did she succeed?" "She stopped me from opening a box," I said, "but she confirmed something for me. She is scared. Gabriel. She is holding on to something by a thread. Fear makes people sloppy." Gabriel said. He slid a piece of paper toward me. "This is what you need to learn." I looked at the paper. It was a list of form numbers. Form 990, Schedule B, Schedule L. "What is this?" I asked. "This is how you hunt," he said. He stood up and walked to the computer terminal. I followed him. He moved with a physical grace I hadn't seen before, the limp less pronounced when his mind was engaged. He sat at the keyboard and began to type. "The Butler Outreach Trust is a 501c3 organization," he explained, his voice low and professional. "That means they are tax-exempt, but the price of that exemption is transparency. They have to file public disclosures." He pulled up a database I had never seen. "Most people look at the glossy annual reports," he said. "The photos of smiling children and ribbon cuttings. You ignore those. You look at the tax filings." He pointed to a line on the screen. "Here," he said. "This is the filing from 3 years ago. Look at the board minutes attachment." I leaned in. The text was dry, bureaucratic. "Motion to approve vendor contract for community engagement. Motion carried. Now look at the amendment," Gabriel said. He clicked another tab. "Note: vendor selection waived due to expedited timeline." "Expedited timeline," Gabriel murmured. "That is the magic word. It means we do not want to bid this out because we already know who we want to pay." He looked at me. "You need to request the full historical filings from the State Attorney General's Charities Bureau, not just what is online. You need the rejected filings, the ones they had to amend." "How do you know all this?" I asked. He paused, his hand hovering over the mouse. "I spent 10 years tracking money for people who wanted to hide it," he said. "Or finding it for people who had it stolen. It is a language, Ariana. Once you speak it, you cannot stop hearing it." He printed a stack of pages. "Take these," he said. "Study them. Look for the name Northwell Civic Strategies." I took the warm paper. "Thank you." He didn't smile. "Just be careful." "Paper cuts," he said. But his eyes were serious. I spent the afternoon following the paper trail. The address for Northwell Civic Strategies, listed on the tax form, was in a town called Oakhaven, 20 miles west. I drove there. The GPS led me to a strip mall sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The sign above the door read, "Pack and Ship." I went inside. The air smelled of cardboard and tape. A bored teenager sat behind the counter. "I am looking for Suite 400. I said. The kid pointed to a wall of small metal mailboxes. "That is the 400 block. Box 400 is right there." I looked. It was a standard rental mailbox, 3 inches by 5 inches. Northwell Civic Strategies was not an office. It was a slot in a wall. I took a picture of the mailbox with my phone as I drove back to Briar Glen. My mind kept snagging on a contradiction. Celeste had told me that grandmother was confused at the end. She had said Margot didn't know what she was signing, that Celeste had to guide her, but Marin Rhodes, a lawyer who did not suffer fools, had said the will was amended recently with detailed instructions. If Margot was confused, Marin wouldn't have let her sign a will. Marin was ethical to a fault. So Celeste was lying about Margot's mental state. Why? To justify why Celeste had taken over, to make it seem like Celeste was the steward of a sinking ship, rather than the captain steering it into an iceberg. I pulled into the parking lot of the grocery store to buy water. As I walked to my car, a shadow detached itself from the side of the building. I jumped, clutching my keys. Ms. Butler? It was Lenora Pike. She was wearing a raincoat, the collar pulled up. She looked terrified. "Lenora," I said, "you scared me. I cannot talk long," she said. "I saw your car." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found it," she whispered. "The email thread, the one I told you about." She shoved it into my hand. "Be careful," she said. "Celeste is firing people. She fired the accountant today. Why? She said he was asking too many questions about the storage unit." Lenora turned and practically ran to her car, a beat-up sedan parked 3 rows away. I sat in my driver's seat and unfolded the paper. It was a printout of an email chain from 3 years ago. From Compliance Ashford Group, Com, to C. Butler Trust. Subject: Inquiry regarding grant disbursement 8820 EMS. Butler: We have flagged a circular pattern in the grant funds sent to Northwell Civic Strategies. Please provide documentation of services rendered. And the reply, from Celeste: Mr. Hale, your inquiry is noted. However, your understanding of our local vendor relationships is lacking. I will be speaking to your superiors about your tone. And then, a final email from a generic HR address at the Ashford Group, dated 2 weeks later. Case 402 closed. Personnel change effective immediately. Gabriel was right. She had crushed him. I drove straight to Celeste's house. I was done with coffee shops. I was done with polite texts. Celeste lived in a modern, sprawling house on the ridge, all glass and sharp angles. I rang the bell. She opened the door wearing a silk robe, a glass of white wine in her hand. She looked exhausted. "Ariana," she said, "I am not in the mood." I held up the picture of the mailbox. Northwell Civic Strategies is a box at a pack and ship in Oakhaven. I said. Celeste froze. She stared at the phone screen. "And I have the emails." "Celeste," I said, stepping into the foyer, "I know you got Gabriel fired. I know you threatened his firm." Celeste backed up, stumbling slightly. She put the wineglass down on a side table with a clatter. "You do not know what you are doing," she whispered. "I know exactly what I'm doing." I said, "I am finding the money. Where is it? Celeste? Did you spend it? Did you buy this house with it?" "No!" she screamed. The sound tore out of her throat, raw and ugly. She collapsed onto the bottom step of her grand staircase. She put her head in her hands. I did not steal it for myself. She sobbed. "Then where is it?" "I had to move it," she cried. "Grandmother." She was so demanding. She wanted the trust to be the biggest in the county. She wanted Gallus. She wanted influence. But the returns were down. The market was crashing. We didn't have the liquidity. "So you made it up?" I asked. "I moved money to cover the gaps," Celeste said, looking up, her face streaked with tears. "I sent it to Northwell. Then Northwell paid the consulting fees back to the operating account so it looked like new revenue. It was a bridge loan. I was just trying to keep the lights on. That is fraud." "Celeste," I said, "that is Ponzi scheme math. I was going to pay it back," she insisted. "I just needed time. But then that man, that investigator, he started sniffing around. I panicked. So you destroyed him. I protected the family." Celeste stood up, her anger returning. "If he had exposed us then, Grandmother would have died in disgrace. The foundation would have been shuttered. I saved her legacy. You saved yourself," I said coldly. "And where did the money go?" "Celeste, if you moved it to Northwell, and then back, there is still money missing. Marin said there are gaps." Celeste looked away. Her eyes shifted to the dark window. "It is complicated," she said. "There were other expenses." "What expenses?" "I cannot tell you," she whispered. "You have to tell me, or I go to Marin." "You cannot." She said, "If you go to Marin, the estate freezes. You get nothing. I get nothing. The Red Cross gets everything." "Is that what you want?" To burn $12 million to prove a point? I looked at my sister. She was trembling, cornered, and pathetic. But she was also right. She held the detonator. I want the truth. Celeste, the truth is messy, she said. Go home. Ariana, let me fix the records. We can both walk away rich. I turned and walked to the door. I am not walking away, I said, and neither are you. I found Gabriel an hour later. He wasn't at the library or the shelter. He was sitting on a bench overlooking the river, the dark water churning below. I sat down next to him. She admitted it. I said, Gabriel didn't look surprised. The mechanics of it? Northwell was a shell. I said, she was cycling money to inflate revenue. She claims it was to keep the trust afloat. He nodded. That is usually how it starts. Desperation, not greed, but it always ends in greed. She says she didn't steal it for herself. I said, but she won't say where the missing leaks went. Gabriel picked up a stone and threw it into the river. It vanished without a splash. There is something you need to understand about donor networks. He said, what? They are not just about charity. He said, they are about favors. When I was investigating the Butler Trust, I wasn't just looking at the money going out. I was looking at who was putting money in. And there were deposits from a group called Briar Glen Tomorrow, a political action committee. Politics? I asked. Influence, Gabriel corrected. I think someone was using the Butler name to wash campaign money, or to buy favors from the zoning board. Your grandmother sat on every board in town. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. So Celeste wasn't just cooking the books to look good. I said, she was hiding a laundering operation. Maybe she didn't know. Gabriel said, maybe she was just the useful idiot, or maybe she was the architect. Why did you end up here? Gabriel? I asked. I mean, really. You could have gotten another job. You are brilliant. He looked at his hands. They were scarred and rough. I fought them, he said. When they fired me, I sued. I spent my savings on lawyers. I went to the press. But the Ashfords own the papers. They buried me. They countersued for breach of contract. They took my house. They took my credentials. He took a shaky breath. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me was that nobody cared. I showed people the proof, and they shrugged. They preferred the lie because the lie was profitable. He looked at me, his eyes wet. I stopped being able to live inside myself. Ariana, I couldn't participate in a world that worked like that, so I stepped out of it. I reached out and touched his hand. It was cold. You are not out of it, I said. You are right here, and we are going to finish it. He pulled his hand away gently. This isn't just sibling rivalry anymore. Ariana. If there is political money involved, if there are people like the Ashfords, this is dangerous. I don't care. I said, you should. He said. He stood up. I have a place to sleep tonight, he said. A friend at the shelter saved me a cot. Gabriel. I said. He paused. Thank you, I said, for teaching me how to hunt. He looked back, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Happy hunting. Ariana. I watched him walk away. The city of Briar Glen twinkled in the distance, a grid of lights hiding 1,000 secrets. I thought about the metal box in the study. B. G. Briar Glen Tomorrow. The box wasn't just tax receipts. It was the smoking gun, and Celeste knew it. I got into my car. The stakes had shifted. It wasn't about the inheritance anymore. It was about the machine, the quiet, polite, well-dressed machine that chewed up people like Gabriel Hale and spit them out. And my sister was greasing the gears. I gripped the steering wheel. I was going to break the machine. Or, I was going to break my sister. I wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. The conference room at Ketterly and Rhodes felt smaller than it had 2 days ago. The mahogany table, once a symbol of expansive power, now felt like a partition in a prison visitation room. Marin Rhodes sat at the head, her hands clasped over a file that was growing thicker by the hour. Celeste sat on the left. I sat on the right. We were separated by 4 feet of polished wood and a lifetime of resentment. This is not working, Marin said. Her voice was devoid of its usual legal detachment. It was sharp with frustration. "We are trying." "Marin," Celeste said, smoothing the fabric of her skirt, "Ariana is simply being difficult. She refuses to sign the preliminary compliance waiver, because the waiver is a lie." I looked at Marin. "The waiver states that we have reviewed the financial records of the Butler Outreach Trust and found them to be accurate. We have not found them to be accurate. We have found them to be missing." Marin took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Let me be clear." Marin said, "Margot's will is a complex instrument. It does not just bequeath assets. It mandates behavior. Clause 14. Section B. The beneficiaries must act jointly in the resolution of all outstanding trust matters." "What does that mean in plain English?" I asked. "It means you cannot act alone." "Ariana," Marin said, "and Celeste cannot act alone. You must present a unified reconciliation plan for the missing records. If you cannot agree on a statement of facts regarding the trust's history, the probate judge will declare the conditions of the will unmet." "And then?" Celeste asked, her voice tight. "And then the estate is dissolved," Marin said. "The assets are liquidated to the named secondary beneficiary, the Red Cross, and you two get nothing, not the house, not the accounts, not even the jewelry." Silence stretched between us. "You have 48 hours, Marin said. "I am scheduling the second inheritance meeting for Thursday morning. Bring me a joint plan, or bring me your resignations as beneficiaries." We walked out of the office into the biting cold of the parking lot. The sky was a flat, oppressive gray. I unlocked my rental car, but before I could open the door, Celeste was there. Her hand slammed against the window. Holding it shut. "Get in my car," she said. "No, Ariana, please, just for 5 minutes. No lawyers, no Marin, just sisters." I looked at her. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Against my better judgment, I nodded. I climbed into the passenger seat of her pristine white SUV. The interior smelled of expensive leather and vanilla air freshener, the scent of a life that was aggressively maintained. Celeste didn't start the engine. She gripped the steering wheel, staring out at the brick facade of the law firm. "I can make this easy for you," she said. "How?" "I have liquidity," she said. "Personal liquidity, not from the trust, from my own investments." I waited. "I will write you a check today," she said. $2 million. It is less than half the estate. I know, but it is immediate. It is clean. You take it, you sign the waiver Marin wants, and you go back to Philadelphia." I stared at her. She was offering me a bribe to cover up a crime I still didn't fully understand. "You are trying to buy me off," I said. "I am trying to save us." Celeste turned to me, her face twisting. "Do you think I want this? Do you think I want Marin looking through my emails? I am offering you a way out. $2 million. Ariana, you could buy a house. You could quit that miserable job you have. You could be free. I am already free." "Celeste," I said, "that is the difference between us. Don't give me that moral superiority speech." She spat. "You want the money. Everyone wants the money. I do not want money that is dirty." I said, "It is not dirty," she screamed. "It is complicated. You do not understand how this town works. You do not understand what I had to do to keep grandmother happy." She wanted results. Ariana. She wanted the Ashfords to come to her parties. She wanted the mayor to return her calls. "Do you know how much that costs?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. "It costs your soul." "Apparently." I said. Celeste laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "Oh, grow up. This is not a fairy tale. This is business. Take the deal." "No." Celeste's face hardened. The desperation vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. "If you don't take it," she said softly, "you will regret it. I will bury you in legal fees. I will sue you for defamation. I will make sure you spend every dime you have defending yourself against me." Is that a threat? It is a promise. I opened the door and got out. I stood on the pavement and looked back at her. Keep your money. Celeste, I am going to find the truth, and if it ruins you, that is your fault, not mine. I slammed the door and walked away. I spent the next few hours in the library, driven by a cold fury. Celeste's offer had clarified things. She wasn't just hiding incompetence, she was hiding malice. I went back to the file Gabriel had told me to look for. Northwell Civic Strategies. I cross-referenced the payments in the public record with local news archives. Every time the Butler Outreach Trust paid Northwell, there was a corresponding event in town within 2 weeks. A zoning hearing, a council vote, a gala. I searched for the names associated with Northwell. There were none listed on the state filings, just the registered agent at the mailbox store, but I found a link on an archived community calendar, sponsored by Briar Glen Tomorrow. I looked up Briar Glen Tomorrow. It was a nonprofit focused on economic development. Its board of directors was a who's who of the city's power brokers. And right there, listed as the treasurer, was Richard Ashford, the Ashfords. The real estate family Gabriel had mentioned, they owned half the commercial district. I dug deeper. I found a photo from a fundraiser 3 years ago. It was a groundbreaking ceremony for a new luxury condo development on the riverfront. Standing in the center, holding a golden shovel, was Richard Ashford, and standing next to him, smiling that bright, brittle smile, was Celeste, and behind them, in the blurred background, was my grandmother, Margot Butler. She was in a wheelchair, looking frail but alert. I zoomed in on the banner behind them, Briar Glen. Tomorrow, building the future, the dates aligned perfectly. The trust paid Northwell $10,000 on May 4th. On May 10th, Briar Glen Tomorrow made a donation of $8,000 to the re-election campaign of the zoning board chairman. On May 15th, the zoning board approved the Ashford condo project. It was a laundering cycle. The Butler Trust was the intake valve. Northwell was the filter. Briar Glen. Tomorrow was the payout, and Celeste was the one turning the handle. My phone buzzed. It was an automated alert I had set up for the Butler name. Tonight, the Briar Glen Civic Awards Gala. Honoring Celeste Butler for excellence in philanthropy. Of course, the gala was held at the Country Club, a sprawling white-columned building that looked like a plantation house that had forgotten to be ashamed of itself. I didn't have a ticket, but I had my name. I was a butler. In this town, that still opened doors. Even if I was the wrong kind of butler. I arrived at 7. I wore the only formal dress I had brought, a simple black sheath that was appropriate for a funeral, but severe for a party. I walked past the check-in table, nodding at the woman with the clipboard. "Ariana?" she asked, surprised. "We didn't know you were in town." "I am here to support my sister." I lied. She smiled, relieved. "Oh, that is wonderful. She is at table 1. I walked into the ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos and sequins. The air smelled of roast beef and expensive lilies. A jazz band was playing something inoffensive in the corner. I saw Celeste immediately. She was at the center table, laughing at something a man with silver hair was saying. The man was Richard Ashford. I stood by the bar, watching. It was a performance. Celeste touched Richard's arm. She nodded at his wife. She waved to the mayor. She was the queen of the ball, the benevolent heiress keeping the city's heart beating. I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned. It wasn't a guest. It was a waiter, holding a tray of champagne. "Ma'am?" he asked. "No, thank you." I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows that lined the ballroom. Beyond the glass, the terrace was dark, but in the shadows of the hedges, I saw movement. A figure in a dark coat, standing just outside the ring of light cast by the chandeliers. Gabriel. I slipped out the side door onto the terrace. The cold air hit me like a slap. I walked to the edge of the patio. "Gabriel?" I whispered. He stepped out from behind a trellis. He was wearing a dark pea coat that looked new, likely from the thrift store I had seen him eyeing. "You should not be here," I said. "I wanted to see who was attending." He said. His voice was tight. I looked back through the window. Celeste was standing up, making her way to the podium. The room applauded. That man, Gabriel said, pointing a trembling finger at the glass. Which one? The one next to the mayor. The one with the red tie. I looked. It was a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, maybe 40, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of soap. Smooth, featureless, and slippery. Who is he? I asked. Tom Harlan, Gabriel said. The name came out like a curse. Who is Tom Harlan? He was the compliance officer who replaced me, Gabriel said, after they fired me. They hired him. He signed off on the audits. He certified the Northwell payments. He is the one who buried the evidence. He is here. He is sitting at the head table. Ariana. He is part of the family. I looked at Gabriel. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and trauma. He wasn't just a homeless man anymore. He was a professional who was watching the people who had destroyed his life eat steak and drink wine. I am going inside. I said, be careful. Gabriel warned. Tom Harlan is not like your sister. He does not have a conscience to wrestle with. He is a cleaner. I walked back inside. The applause was dying down. Celeste was at the microphone, holding a crystal plaque. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. This award belongs to my grandmother, Margot Butler. She taught me that charity is not just about giving money. It is about stewardship. It is about protecting the community we love. The room murmured its approval. I felt bile rise in my throat. Stewardship. Celeste's eyes scanned the room. They landed on me, standing by the door. She faltered for a microsecond, her smile flickering. Then she recovered. Family is everything, she said, staring right at me, and we must do whatever it takes to protect it. She walked off the stage to thunderous applause. She didn't go back to her table. She headed for the side exit, toward the restrooms. I followed her. The ladies' lounge was empty, a sanctuary of pink marble and gold mirrors. Celeste was standing at the sink, splashing cold water on her face. She looked up as I entered, her reflection catching mine in the mirror. You have a lot of nerve coming here, she said. I wanted to see the show. I said, you are a good actress. Celeste, you almost sounded like you believed it. Get out, she hissed. I saw Richard Ashford. I said, and I saw Tom Harlan. Celeste froze. She turned off the tap slowly. You do not know who Tom Harlan is. She said, Gabriel does. I said, he is outside. He told me everything. Harlan is the fixer. He is the one who rubber-stamped your fraud after you got Gabriel fired. Celeste turned around. Her face was wet, water dripping from her chin onto her silk gown. You are playing a dangerous game. Ariana, these are powerful people. I am not afraid of them. I said, you should be. She took a step toward me, her eyes wild. Do you think Richard Ashford cares about a missing $10,000? Do you think the mayor cares? They use the trust because it is convenient. If you expose this, you are not just hurting me. You are taking down the entire power structure of Briar Glen. They will crush you. Let them try. Celeste grabbed my shoulders. Her grip was painful. Listen to me, she screamed. You will destroy us. You will destroy the name. Grandmother worked for 50 years to build this reputation. Grandmother is dead, I shouted back, shoving her away, and her reputation is a lie. Celeste stumbled back against the vanity. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. If you do this, she whispered, I will never forgive you. I will make sure you end up like Gabriel Hale, sleeping in the dirt. I looked at my sister. I saw the fear beneath the rage. She was terrified of the world finding out that she was just a small, frightened woman hiding behind a checkbook. I am already done with you. Celeste, I said. I walked out of the bathroom, leaving her standing there, dripping wet in her ball gown. I left the gala and drove straight to Marin Rhodes's house. It was 9 o'clock at night, but I didn't care. Marin opened the door wearing a cardigan and reading glasses. She looked surprised but not displeased. Ariana, she said, this is irregular. I need to talk to you. Marin, off the record. She stepped back to let me in. We sat in her living room. surrounded by piles of legal journals. I want whistleblower protection, I said. Marin sighed. She took off her glasses. Against whom? She asked. Against the estate, against the trust, against my sister. Marin rubbed her temples. Ariana, she said slowly, you are a beneficiary. You cannot whistleblow on your own inheritance if you report fraud. The estate will be frozen. The IRS will get involved. The Attorney General will get involved. The investigation could take years. I don't care about the money anymore. I said, you say that now. Marin said, but litigation is ugly. If you accuse Celeste of fraud, she will countersue. She will claim you are doing this for leverage. She will drag your personal life into the court records. Let her. Marin looked at me. She studied my face. You found something, didn't you? I found the machine. Marin, the trust is washing money for Briar Glen tomorrow. Celeste is the bagman. Marin closed her eyes. She didn't look surprised. That was the most terrifying part. She looked resigned. Margot walked a fine line. Marin said softly, I advised her against certain associations. But Margot was a pragmatist. Did you know? I asked. I am an attorney. Ariana, I know what is in the documents I draft. I do not ask what is in the documents I do not draft. She stood up and walked to the window. If you go down this path, there is no turning back. You will be the pariah of this town. I am already a pariah. I said, I just want to be an honest one. Marin turned back to me. I cannot give you protection, she said, but I can give you advice. If you are going to pull the trigger, make sure the gun is loaded. You need proof, not just patterns, not just mailboxes. You need the original records. Where are they? I do not know, Marin said. But Margot was a woman who kept insurance. She never trusted anyone completely, not even Celeste. I left Marin's house with a strange sense of calm. The lawyer hadn't stopped me. She had essentially given me permission to hunt. I drove to the one person who might know where the bodies were buried. Lenora Pike lived in a small duplex on the south side of town. The porch light was out. I knocked softly. Lenora opened the door a crack. She was wearing a bathrobe. Ms. Butler, she whispered, please, you cannot be here. I just have one question. Lenora. She looked around the street, checking for watching eyes. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. 3 years ago. You knew Celeste was lying. You knew Gabriel was right. Why did you stay silent? Lenora looked down at her slippers. I have diabetes, she said. Her voice was small, ashamed. The medication costs $600 a month. The trust provides full health insurance. I stared at her. It was so banal. It wasn't greed. It wasn't malice. It was fear of being sick and poor. My husband has a bad back. She continued. We have a second mortgage. If I lost this job, we would lose the house. Celeste knew that. She told me that loyalty was part of the benefits package. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This is how the system worked. It didn't require everyone to be evil. It just required them to be desperate. I am sorry. Lenora, I said. She looked up, tears in her eyes. She is not a monster. You know, Celeste. She is just hollow. She thinks the money fills her up. I walked back to my car. Hollow. It was the perfect word. I went back to the house on Sycamore Drive. I had the key code Marin had given me for the alarm. I let myself in. The house was dark and silent. I went to the study. I looked at the bookshelf. The gray metal box was still there, tucked behind the encyclopedias. I pulled it out. It was locked. I needed the key. I thought about Margot. She was a woman of secrets. She was a woman who tested people. Where would she hide the key to her insurance policy? I sat in her chair. I ran my hands under the desk. Nothing. I opened the drawers. Pens, stamps, paper clips. I remembered something from my childhood. We used to play hide and seek in this room. Margot would sit in this chair and pretend not to see us. Once, when I was 7, I had hidden under the desk and seen her tape something to the bottom of the center drawer. I pulled the center drawer all the way out. I reached underneath, feeling the rough wood. My finger snagged on something smooth. Tape. I peeled it off. A small, brass key fell into my palm. My hands were shaking. I put the key into the lock of the metal box. It turned with a satisfying click. I opened the lid. It wasn't tax receipts. It was a stack of handwritten journals. Margot's journals. I opened the top one. The handwriting was spidery but firm. November 12th. Celeste is getting sloppy. She thinks I do not see the transfers. She is too eager to please Richard. I must intervene, but careful not to spook the board. I flipped forward. January 4th. The investigator. Mr. Hale. He is sharp. I like him, but he is dangerous. Celeste wants him gone. I fear I must let her do it. The alternative is exposure. God forgive me. She knew. She had sacrificed Gabriel to save the family name. At the bottom of the box was a thick envelope. It was sealed with red wax. On the front, in bold letters, "For Ariana, when she is ready to choose." I broke the seal. There was no letter inside, just a single index card. On it was written a date, tomorrow, and a location, the lake house, Blackwood Point, the cabinet in the den. I stared at the card. The lake house. It was a cabin Margot had owned 40 years ago, a place we went in the summers when our parents were still alive. I thought she had sold it decades ago. She hadn't sold it. She had kept it. She had set the stage. I put the journals back in the box and locked it. I tucked the box under my arm. I walked out of the house. The wind was howling now. A storm finally breaking over Briar Glen. I knew what I had to do. I had to go to the cabin, and I knew I wouldn't be alone. I pulled out my phone and texted Celeste. I found the box. I know about the cabin. Meet me there tomorrow at noon. I waited. The reply came 3 seconds later. Don't open it. I didn't reply. I texted Gabriel next. I have the proof. Meet me at Blackwood Point tomorrow. Noon. He replied instantly. I will be there. I drove back to the inn. I put the metal box on the nightstand next to my bed. I lay down, but I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Lenora's insurance and Gabriel's ruined life and Celeste's desperate bribe. Tomorrow, the secrets would come out. Tomorrow, the sisters would face each other without lawyers, without galas, without the buffer of polite society, just us, and the truth, and I had a feeling that the truth was going to hurt more than any of us could imagine. The drive to Blackwood Point took 40 minutes. The road wound around the edge of the reservoir, the asphalt cracking and giving way to gravel as I moved further from the manicured center of Briar Glen. The trees here were older, their trunks thick and gnarled, pressing in on the narrow lane like spectators at an execution. I saw Gabriel waiting for me by the rusted gate. He was leaning against a wooden fence post, his breath puffing white in the freezing air. He looked out of place against the backdrop of the dark water and the looming pines, a man from the street standing on the threshold of Old Money's private retreat. I unlocked the gate and pushed it open. He climbed into the passenger seat without a word. You remember this place? He asked, as we drove up the long, overgrown driveway. I came here as a child. I said, before my parents died, before Margot decided that affection was a weakness. The cabin was not really a cabin. It was a sprawling, cedar-shingled lodge that had been allowed to age gracefully into the landscape. The windows were dark, staring out at the gray lake like empty eyes. I parked the car. We walked up the stone steps to the heavy front door. I used the key I had found in the secret drawer of Margot's desk. The lock was stiff, fighting me for a moment before yielding with a heavy thud. Inside, the air was stale and cold, smelling of wood smoke that had died years ago and dust that had been settling for decades. Sheets covered the furniture, ghostly shapes in the dim light filtering through the dirty glass. I walked straight to the den. It was a room I remembered vividly, a wall of stone with a massive fireplace, leather chairs that swallowed you whole, and a gun cabinet that used to hold my grandfather's rifles. But the gun cabinet was empty, in the center of the room. Sitting on a small, majestic table that had been cleared of dust was a single object, It was an old cassette recorder, the kind with big, clunky buttons. Next to it was a folded piece of heavy cream stationery. I picked up the note. It was Margot's handwriting. The letters sharp and angular. Listen all the way through. Do not stop. Do not judge until the end. I looked at Gabriel. He was standing by the window, looking out at the lake. He seemed to be bracing himself. She knew we would come here, I said. She knew you would come here. Gabriel corrected. She did not know about me. I pressed the button marked play. The wheels of the cassette hissed for a moment, a sound of static that felt like time unwinding. Then, her voice filled the room. It was not the weak, reedy voice of the dying woman I had visited in the hospital. It was the voice of Margot Butler in her prime, imperious, calm, and terrifyingly controlled. Ariana, Celeste, the names hung in the cold air. If you are listening to this, Marin has done her job, and you have found the courage to look past the bank accounts. I am dead, which means I no longer have the luxury of silence. There was a pause on the tape, the sound of a glass being set down on a table. I have failed you both, Margot said. I raised you to be survivors, but I made you into strangers. I withheld my approval because I thought it would make you strong. I see now that it only made you hungry, and hunger makes people careless. I stared at the machine. It felt like she was in the room, sitting in the high-backed chair, judging us. I know about the trust, Margot continued. Her voice dropped an octave. I have known for 3 years. I know about the missing funds. I know about Northwell. And I know about the men in suits who smile at our parties and steal from our pockets. Gabriel turned from the window. His face was rigid. I suspected Celeste was getting pulled in too deep. Margot said, She has always been desperate to please, just like her father. She lacks the spine to say no to powerful men. When the Ashfords came to her, offering influence in exchange for access, she took the bait. She thought she was building a legacy. She was digging a grave. The front door of the cabin slammed open. I jumped, spinning around. Gabriel moved instinctively, stepping into the shadows of the corner. Footsteps pounded on the hardwood floor, fast, frantic. Celeste burst into the den. She was wearing a trench coat over her gala dress from the night before, her hair a tangled mess, her face pale and wild. "Turn it off!" she screamed. She lunged for the table. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "No," I said. "She wanted us to hear this." "It is lies," Celeste cried, clawing at my arm. "It is just her manipulating us from the grave. She was senile. She didn't know what she was saying. I hired a man," Margot's voice continued, oblivious to the chaos in the room. 3 years ago, an outside investigator. I wanted to be sure before I acted." Celeste froze. Her hand fell from my arm. She looked at the tape recorder with horror. His name was Gabriel Hale. Margot said, "In the corner." Gabriel let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He stepped into the light. Celeste saw him, and she shrank back against the stone fireplace. "He was brilliant," Margot said. "He was honest. He found the rot in the foundation within 2 weeks. He brought me a file. He showed me the transfers to Briar Glen tomorrow. He showed me how Richard Ashford was using our family name to wash his campaign contributions." Gabriel walked toward the table. He stared at the spinning tape. "I had a choice," Margot said. The regret in her voice was palpable. A heavy, wet thing. I could expose the truth. I could let Mr. Hale file his report. But if I did, the Butler name would be ruined. The scandal would destroy the foundation. It would destroy Celeste. And I was too proud to let that happen. Gabriel closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, running into the stubble of his beard. "So I fed him to the wolves," Margot said. "I told the board to ignore him. I let Celeste and Richard Ashford discredit him. I watched them destroy a good man's life to save my own reputation. It was the greatest sin of my life. She knew." Gabriel whispered. The words came out strangled. "She hired me. She knew I was right, and she let them bury me. But I cannot die with this lie." The tape continued. So I have created a test. The inheritance is the lever. If you two can stand in a room together and admit the truth, if you can restore the records and clear Mr. Hale's name, the estate will fund a complete restructuring of the trust. The money will be used to pay back what was stolen and to rebuild what was broken. And if you cannot? Margot's voice hardened. If you choose the easy way? If you choose silence? Then the money goes to the Red Cross. Every cent, the house, the investments, the legacy, it all disappears. You will have nothing but your secrets. The choice is yours. Do you want to be rich, or do you want to be free? Click. The tape ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was a silence filled with the wreckage of 3 lives. Celeste slid down the stone facade of the fireplace until she was sitting on the hearth. She pulled her knees to her chest. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. I didn't know she hired him. Celeste whispered, I swear, Ariana, I didn't know. She knew you were stealing. Celeste, I said, she knew you were helping the Ashfords launder money. I didn't think it was stealing, Celeste shouted, her voice cracking. Richard told me it was temporary. He said they needed a bridge loan for the election cycle. He said it was standard practice. And you believed him? I asked. He is Richard Ashford, Celeste cried. He owns the bank. He owns the city council. Who was I to tell him no? I was just the granddaughter. I was just trying to keep the seat at the table. She looked at Gabriel. I am sorry. She said. Gabriel didn't look at her. He was looking at the empty gun cabinet. She hired me, he said softly. I thought I was working for the board. I thought I was working for the compliance committee, but it was her. She brought me in. She tested me, and when I passed the test, she executed me. He turned to me. His eyes were dark holes of pain. She was not a victim. Ariana, she was the architect. I walked over to the cabinet below the recorder. It was locked. I tried the key again. It turned. Inside was a single leather binder. I pulled it out and opened it on the table. It was the shadow ledger. Here it is, I said. The pages were filled with Margot's handwriting, listing dates and amounts. May 4th, 10,000 to Northwell. Tom Harlan countersign. June 12th, 15,000 to Northwell. Ashford request. August 1st, 8,000 to Briar Glen. Tomorrow. It was all there. Every dollar, every bribe, every lie. The amounts are small, I said, tracing the numbers. That is how they did it. Just under the reporting threshold for automatic flagging. 10,000 here, 5,000 there. Over 3 years, it adds up to $500,000. $500,000, Celeste whispered. I thought it was less. I never kept track of the total. I just signed the checks when Richard sent the invoices. You signed them, I said. That makes you liable. I know, Celeste screamed. She stood up, pacing the small room. I know I am liable. That is why I tried to stop you. That is why I offered you the money. If Marin sees this, if the authorities see this, I go to prison. Ariana, she grabbed my hands. Her palms were sweating. Please, she begged. We can burn this. We can burn the tape. We can burn the binder. No one knows it exists but us. And Gabriel. I said. Celeste looked at him. I can pay you. She said to him, I can give you $1 million, $2 million. You can start over. You can go anywhere. Gabriel looked at her with a profound, exhausting pity. You still do not get it, do you? He asked. It is not about the money. I lost my wife because of this. She left me when the lawsuit started. I lost my reputation. I lost my self-respect. You cannot buy that back with a check from the account you used to ruin me. He walked over to the table and placed his hand on the binder. This is the only thing that matters, he said to me. The truth. He looked me in the eye. You have to turn it in. Ariana, you have to give this to Marin. If I do, Celeste goes to jail. I said, maybe, Gabriel said, or maybe she makes a deal. But if you burn it, you become her. You become Margot. You become another butler who protects the name and destroys the people. I looked at the binder. I looked at the tape recorder. I thought about the last 3 years. The silence between us, the Christmas cards, the superficiality. Celeste was a mess. She was vain. She was weak. And she was cruel. But she was my sister, and she had been drowning while I was safe in Philadelphia. Margot did this, I said. She set this up. She watched you drown, Celeste, and she didn't throw you a rope. She just took notes. She wanted us to choose, Celeste said, wiping her eyes. She wanted to see if we were strong enough to destroy each other. No, I said. She wanted to see if we were strong enough to save each other. I closed the binder. We are not burning it, I said. Celeste wailed, a sound of pure despair. And we are not handing it over to the police. Not yet. I looked at Gabriel. We are going to the meeting. I said, the final inheritance meeting. Tomorrow. Who is going to be there? Gabriel asked. Marin, I said, and Lenora Pike. And I suspect, if we make enough noise, the board members, including Richard Ashford's people, we walk in there together. I said to Celeste, you, me, and Gabriel. Me? Gabriel asked. Yes, I said. You are the witness. You are the proof. And what do we do? Celeste asked. Trembling. We present the reconciliation plan. I said, just like the will requires. We present the truth. We admit the fraud. We admit the cover-up. And we demand that the estate uses the $12 million to fix it. Celeste stared at me. We lose the money, she said. If we admit it, the money goes to the restitution. It goes to the Red Cross. We get nothing. We get our lives back. I said, you get out from under Richard Ashford's thumb. You stop lying. You stop being afraid of every shadow. And prison? Celeste asked. If we come forward voluntarily, if we use the estate to pay back every cent plus interest, and if we expose Ashford, Marin is a good lawyer. She can cut a deal. You were coerced. Celeste, you were a pawn. Celeste looked at the binder. She looked at the tape recorder. She looked at the empty gun cabinet where our grandfather's rifles used to be. I am terrified, she whispered. Good, I said. You should be. I turned to Gabriel. Are you in? I asked. It is the hard path. You might not get a payout. You might just get an apology and a bus ticket. But you will get your name back. Gabriel looked at the tape recorder. He reached out and pressed the stop button. I do not want a bus ticket, he said. I want to see Tom Harlan's face when I walk into that room. Then it is settled. I said. I picked up the binder. I picked up the tape. We drove back to town in a convoy. I led. Celeste followed in her white SUV. We stopped at the Briar Glen Inn. I invited them both into my room. It was neutral ground. We spent the night preparing. It was the strangest family reunion of my life. Me, my estranged sister, and the homeless man our grandmother had used to destroy us. We went through the ledger line by line. Gabriel used his forensic skills to map the flow of money. Celeste filled in the blanks, the meetings, the phone calls, the pressure. I saw a different side of Celeste that night. Beneath the layers of panic and narcissism, there was a woman who was exhausted. She told us about the lunches with Richard Ashford, how he would touch her shoulder and tell her she was visionary, all while sliding a new invoice across the tablecloth. She told us about the nights she lay awake, wondering when the house of cards would fall. He made me feel important, she admitted, drinking a cup of vending machine coffee. Grandmother never did. She just looked at me like I was a disappointment. Richard looked at me like I was a partner. He looked at you like you were a mark. Gabriel said gently, I know that now. She said, by dawn, we had a document. It wasn't a legal brief. It was a confession, a timeline, a map of the corruption. We stood by the window as the sun came up over the slate roofs of Briar Glen. Are you ready? I asked. Celeste smoothed her dress. She looked tired, her eyes bruised with fatigue, but she wasn't shaking anymore. No, she said, but I am doing it anyway. Gabriel stood up. He had shaved in my bathroom. He was wearing a fresh shirt I had bought him from the all-night superstore down the road. He looked like Gabriel Hale again, "Let's go," he said. We drove to Ketterley and Rhodes. The parking lot was full. It was Thursday morning, the deadline. We walked into the lobby. The receptionist looked up, startled to see the three of us walking in formation. "They are waiting in the main boardroom," she said. We walked down the hall. My heels clicked on the marble. Celeste's steps were softer, hesitant, but she kept pace. Gabriel walked with his limp, but his head was high. I pushed open the double doors. The room was full. Marin Rhodes was at the head of the table. Lenora Pike was there, looking like she was about to be sick, but there were others. A man in a sharp gray suit sat to Marin's right. I recognized him from the gala. Tom Harlan. And next to him, looking bored and irritated, was a lawyer I didn't know, a representative from Briar Glen Tomorrow. They had been notified. The machine had sensed a threat. Marin looked up. She saw me. She saw Celeste, and then she saw Gabriel. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. She knew. In that instant, she knew we had found the bodies. "Good morning, Marin," I said, walking to the foot of the table. "Miss Butler," Tom Harlan said, his voice smooth as oil. "We were not expecting guests." "This is not a guest," I said. "This is a witness." I threw the leather binder onto the mahogany table. It landed with a heavy slap that echoed in the silence. "And we have the reconciliation plan you asked for," I said. Celeste stepped forward. She looked at Tom Harlan. She looked at Lenora. "We are not signing the waiver," Celeste said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "Why not?" Tom Harlan asked, a dangerous edge creeping into his tone. "Because the records are not accurate," Celeste said, "and you know it. Tom, because you helped me falsify them." The room exploded into noise. The lawyer from Briar Glen Tomorrow stood up. Marin slammed her hand on the table, but I didn't hear them. I was looking at Gabriel. He was staring at Tom Harlan. And for the first time in 3 years, Tom Harlan looked afraid. We had crossed the Rubicon. The bridge was burning behind us, and the only way out was through the fire. The double doors of the conference room swung shut behind us, sealing the room with a pneumatic hiss. The air inside was recycled and tense, smelling faintly of old coffee and expensive cologne. It was the smell of a room where people made decisions that ruined other people's lives. We took our seats. I sat in the center, directly across from Marin Rhodes. Celeste sat to my left, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white ridges. Gabriel sat to my right. He did not lean back. He sat on the edge of the leather chair, his posture alert, his eyes scanning the faces of the men who had erased him 3 years ago. Marin Rhodes looked at us. She adjusted her glasses, her face unreadable. "This is the final inheritance meeting for the estate of Margot Butler," she said. "Present are the beneficiaries, Ariana Butler and Celeste Butler. Also present is the estate executor, myself." She gestured to the end of the table. "We are joined by Mr. Simon Vance, senior auditor for the firm, and—" Marin paused, her gaze sliding to the 2 men sitting on the opposite side. "Mr. Thomas Harlan, representing the current compliance board of the Butler Outreach Trust, and Mr. Marcus Dean, representing Briar Glen Tomorrow." Marcus Dean was a man I had never seen before. He was young, sharp-jawed, and wearing a suit that cost more than my annual salary. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a weapon. "Mr. Dean requested to be present after being notified of potential irregularities involving his client. Marin said, 'I have allowed it, on the condition that he observes only. Observation depends on the relevance of the discussion.'" Marcus Dean said. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and threatening. "If privileged information regarding Briar Glen Tomorrow is discussed, I will intervene." I looked at him. I felt a cold calm settle over me. They were afraid. They had sent the attack dog because they knew the fence was broken. "We are here to review the reconciliation plan for the Butler Outreach Trust," Marin said. "As per the will, the beneficiaries must present a unified front regarding the missing records." She looked at me. "Ariana? Celeste? Do you have a statement?" I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my hands were steady. I reached into my bag and pulled out the heavy leather binder I had retrieved from the cabin. I placed it on the mahogany table. It landed with a sound like a gunshot, a flat, heavy slap that made Lenora Pike flinch. Next to it, I placed the cassette recorder and the cassette tape. "We do not have a reconciliation plan," I said. "We have a confession." Tom Harlan leaned forward, a polite, condescending smile plastered on his face. "Ms. Butler, if this is about the clerical errors we discussed, it is not about errors." "Tom," I said, cutting him off, "it is about the ledger." I opened the binder. I turned it around and slid it across the table toward Marin. "This is the shadow ledger," I said. "It was kept by Margot Butler. It details every transfer made from the trust to Northwell Civic Strategies over the last 3 years. It lists the dates, the amounts, and the countersignatures." Marin looked down at the open page. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes stopped moving. She was reading the numbers. "This is inadmissible," Marcus Dean said. Standing up, "That is a private document. We have no verification of its provenance. The provenance is my grandmother's locked cabinet," I said, "and the handwriting is hers." I pointed to the column on the right, "And those initials next to the payments? T.H. That is you. Tom, you signed off on the compliance checks for vendors that did not exist." Tom Harlan's smile vanished. He looked at the binder, then at Marcus Dean. "This is absurd," Tom said. "I review hundreds of vendors, and you approved a mailbox in Oakhaven as a legitimate consulting firm?" I asked. "You approved $50,000 in payments to a company that has no employees, no website, and no product?" "That is a matter of interpretation." Marcus Dean said, "Consulting is an intangible asset." I reached for the tape recorder. "Is this intangible?" I asked. I pressed the button. The wheels turned. The hiss of static filled the room. "I know about the missing funds. I know about Northwell. And I know about the men in suits who smile at our parties and steal from our pockets." Margot's voice was a physical force in the room. Tom Harlan went pale. Lenora Pike put her hand over her mouth. Even Marcus Dean went still. I suspected Celeste was getting pulled in too deep. She lacks the spine to say no to powerful men. I let it play until the part about Gabriel. His name was Gabriel Hale. I fed him to the wolves. I stopped the tape. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Marin. The records were not lost. I said, "They were destroyed. And they were destroyed to hide the fact that the Butler Outreach Trust has been acting as a laundering vehicle for campaign contributions to Briar Glen tomorrow." Marin closed the binder. She took off her glasses and placed them on the table. She looked at the auditor. "Simon Vance." "Mr. Vance," she said, "based on this ledger, what is your assessment?" Simon Vance was a man of numbers. He didn't care about politics. He cared about columns adding up. "If these figures are accurate," he said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion, "we are looking at significant violations of the tax code, self-dealing, improper disbursement of charitable assets, and likely wire fraud. What are the consequences?" I asked. Vance shrugged. "The IRS will freeze the trust immediately. They will audit the last 7 years. They will seek civil recovery of the funds from the trustees. And they will refer the case to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation." "Criminal," Marcus Dean said. "Let us not be dramatic. This is a family dispute. It is fraud," Gabriel said. The voice came from my right. It was quiet, calm, and devastatingly clear. Marcus Dean turned his head. "Who is this?" "My name is Gabriel Hale," Gabriel said. Tom Harlan flinched. He looked at Gabriel as if he were seeing a dead man walking. "I was the senior compliance investigator for the Ashford Donor Group 3 years ago." Gabriel continued. "I was hired by Margot Butler to audit the trust. I found the Northwell payments. I found the loop." He looked at Tom Harlan. "I filed a report." Gabriel said, "Case number 402. It was suppressed. I was fired. My reputation was destroyed. And Mr. Harlan here took my job." "You were fired for incompetence," Tom Harlan spat. You were unstable. I was right, Gabriel said. And now there is a ledger that proves it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scream. He simply laid the truth on the table like a winning hand of cards. Marin Rhodes turned to Celeste. Celeste? She asked. Celeste was staring at the table. She looked small, the power suit, the perfect hair, the jewelry. It all looked like a costume she was wearing for a play that had been canceled. Celeste, Marin repeated, you are the acting director. You signed the tax returns. Is this ledger accurate? Marcus Dean leaned over. Ms. Butler, I would advise you not to speak. You are under no obligation. Shut up, Celeste said. She didn't look at him. She looked at Marin. It is accurate, she whispered. Celeste, Marcus Dean warned. I said shut up, Celeste shouted. She slammed her hand on the table. She turned to face Marin. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. But she didn't wipe them away. I did it, she said. I authorized the transfers. I set up the Northwell account. Richard Ashford told me it was necessary. He said the foundation was losing relevance. He said we needed political capital if we wanted to survive. Did you know it was illegal? Marin asked. I knew it was wrong. Celeste said. She looked at me. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to be the one who let the family fail. Grandmother, she was so heavy. Her expectations were so heavy. I thought if I could just keep the money flowing, if I could just keep the Ashfords happy, I could fix it later. She looked at Gabriel. I didn't know they would destroy you, she said. I just wanted you to go away. I was scared. That is not an excuse, Gabriel said softly. I know, Celeste said. She looked at me, and I resented you. Ariana, I resented you so much. You got to leave. You got to go to Philadelphia and live in a small apartment and pay your own bills and be free. I was stuck here. I was the responsible one. I was the one who had to hold the ceiling up while it was collapsing. She took a deep breath. I am not the responsible one, she said. I am just a liar. The room was silent. The confession hung in the air, stripping the varnish off the mahogany table. Marcus Dean stood up. I am terminating my presence here, he said, gathering his briefcase. Briar Glen. Tomorrow denies any knowledge of these transactions. We will be conducting our own internal review. He walked out. He didn't look at Tom Harlan. He abandoned him, just like the system always abandoned the people who got caught. Tom Harlan sat there, his face gray. He knew he was next. Marin Rhodes sighed. She looked older than she had 10 minutes ago. Thank you. Celeste, she said. That will be noted in the minutes. Marin reached into her briefcase. She pulled out the final envelope. The sealed letter. There is one more piece of business, Marin said. Margot's will included a contingency, a final instruction to be read only if the sisters successfully identified the irregularities in the trust. She broke the wax seal. She unfolded the heavy paper. To my granddaughters. Marin read, If you are hearing this, you have faced the truth. You have done the hard thing. Now you must do the hardest thing. Marin looked up. The estate is valued at $12 million, she said. Margot has left you a choice regarding its distribution. She laid 2 documents on the table. Option A. Marin said, You may each take a personal inheritance of $500,000, immediate cash, tax-free. The remainder of the estate, $11 million, will be donated to the Red Cross. And the condition? I asked. The condition is confidentiality. Marin said, You must sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the trust's history. The records will be sealed. The ledger will be destroyed. The reputation of the family remains intact. I looked at the document. It was a bribe, a final test from the grave. Take the money, bury the bodies, and walk away. And option B? I asked. Option B, Marin said. You refuse the personal inheritance. You take nothing. And the money? The entire $12 million goes into a new entity. Marin said. The Butler Restitution Fund. The mandate of this fund will be to audit the past 10 years of the trust, repay any misappropriated funds to the original donors, and finance an independent oversight committee for local charities. Marin looked at Gabriel, and, she added, to provide financial restitution to any individuals harmed by the trust's administrative actions, including legal fees and lost wages. Gabriel looked up. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened. So we can fix it, I said. We can pay back the money Celeste moved. We can clear Gabriel's name. We can expose Ashford. Yes, Marin said. But if you choose option B, you leave this room with nothing. No inheritance, no house, no safety net. And you, Celeste, will likely face legal prosecution without the shield of the family fortune to defend you. Marin leaned back. You must agree. Unanimously. If you do not agree, the default is option A. I looked at Celeste. She was staring at the two papers. $500,000. It was enough to start over. It was enough to hire a defense lawyer. It was safety. Celeste, I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were fearful. If we take the money, I said, if we take the $500,000 and sign the papers, will you ever tell the truth? She opened her mouth to speak. She hesitated. She looked at Tom Harlan, who was watching her with a desperate hope. He wanted us to take the money. He wanted the silence. I want to say yes. Celeste whispered, I want to say I would take the money and then fix it anyway. But I wouldn't. Why? I asked. Because I am weak, she said. Her voice broke. I have been pretending to be strong for so long, but I am not. If I have the money, I will use it to hide. I will use it to protect myself. I do not know who I am without the lie. Ariana, the lie is the only thing that has kept me warm. She looked at the option B document. If you want me to be honest, she said, you have to take the option to lie away from me. I smiled. It was the most sisterly thing she had ever said. She was asking me to save her from herself. I looked at Marin. We choose option B. I said, Are you sure? Marin asked. There is no going back. I am sure. I said, I picked up the pen. I signed the document for the restitution fund. I slid the paper to Celeste. She looked at it. Her hand shook. She picked up the pen. She looked at Tom Harlan one last time. I am sorry. Tom, she said. She signed her name. Tom Harlan stood up. He looked like he was going to vomit. You are making a mistake, he said. You are ruining everything. We are fixing everything, Gabriel said. Tom Harlan grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the room. The door slammed behind him. Marin Rhodes picked up the signed document. She looked at it, and for the first time in my life, I saw her smile. A genuine, proud smile. Margot would have been furious, Marin said, and she would have been incredibly proud. She looked at Simon Vance. Mr. Vance, you have your mandate. The estate is liquidated. Begin the audit. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. We walked out of the building into the noon sun. It was bright and cold, the kind of light that reveals every crack in the pavement. I stood on the sidewalk with Celeste and Gabriel. We were broke. I had my return ticket to Philadelphia and about $2,000 in my checking account. Celeste had a frozen bank account and a looming indictment. Gabriel had nothing but the clothes on his back and a promise of future restitution, but the air tasted sweet. What happens now? Celeste asked. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Now the lawyers get rich, I said, and you get a public defender. Celeste laughed. A short, dry sound. A public defender. Mother would die of shame. Mother is not here, I said. I turned to Gabriel. Thank you, I said. He nodded. He looked cleaner, lighter. The weight of the secret was gone. I am going to go to the shelter, he said. Tell Sarah the news. You will get paid. I said, the fund will cover your lost wages. It might take months, but it will happen. I know. He said, but for tonight, I just want to sleep without being angry. He shook my hand. Then, he turned to Celeste. He hesitated. Celeste flinched, expecting anger. Good luck, Celeste, Gabriel said. The truth is hard, but it is easier than the alternative. He turned and walked away, his limp barely visible as he moved down the street. I watched him go. Then I looked at my sister. "Are you going to be okay?" I asked. "No," she said honestly. "I am going to lose the house. I am going to lose my friends. I am probably going to lose my freedom for a while." She looked at me, but I think I might finally be able to sleep. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was tentative, but real. "You are going back to Philadelphia?" she asked. "Tomorrow," I said. "I have a job. Will you come back? For the hearings?" I squeezed her hand. "I will be there," I said, "every time." We stood there for a moment longer, two sisters standing in the wreckage of a fortune, listening to the traffic of Briar Glen move around us. We had lost $12 million. We had lost the family name. But as I looked at Celeste, standing there without her armor, I realized we had found something else. We had found the bottom, and from the bottom, there was nowhere to go but up. Justice had begun. Reconciliation was uncertain, but for the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was waiting to be filled. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark heart of a family that thought money could bury the truth, and the two sisters who had to burn it all down to find each other again. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Are you in a bustling city like Philadelphia, or a quiet town like Briar Glen? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of betrayal, justice, and the complex webs we weave, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts on Ariana's choice. Would you have taken the money, or would you have chosen the truth? Until next time.